Just days after Deion Sanders said he would be interested in coaching his sons in the NFL, a report just came out that he reached out for an NFL job.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I'm your host, Kevin Borba. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5, get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you guys for making me your first listen of the day. Like I said, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, so make sure to like, subscribe, share this with a friend, give me 5 stars. And let's dive into the latest on Colorado and Coach Prime's coaching endeavors, because we all thought, or at least those of us who are using our brains logically, we all thought it was kind of fishy that all of a sudden, out of the blue, he goes on Good Morning America, and rather than dancing around the question and saying, I'm not interested in coaching at the NFL level, I have no interest in following my kids to the NFL, like he's been saying for the past year and a half, he was asked about coaching at the NFL level, and he said, you know what? If I could coach my sons, plural, I would. And everyone was like, oh, maybe we misunderstood him, right? And then he goes on a podcast right after, right? And he goes, yeah, you got to think about this for me as a father. Like, so clearly the interest is there, and I think a lot of people were in denial about that and didn't want to believe what he was saying. Well, today, a report from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Raiders insider Vincent Bonsignor, I believe is how you say his last name, reported that Coach Prime's camp reached out to the Las Vegas Raiders to express interest in their opening, because obviously they fired Antonio Pierce. I think it was last week. The Raiders have the number 6 pick in the NFL draft, which is right in the position to either draft Shedeur or possibly trade up and draft Shedeur, which would allow him to coach his son again. But this is what the report had to say. Colorado football head coach Deion Sanders has his eyes on the Raiders coaching job, according to a person with knowledge of the situation. He has a very strong interest in the job, the person said. He said the person indicated that the NFL connected associates of Sanders reached out to the Raiders to express Sanders' interest in the opening. That being said, the report also indicated that there's not a clear understanding if the Raiders are interested in Deion Sanders, because obviously they have guys like Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, Lions defense coordinator Aaron Glenn. They also have Pete Carroll in the mix, Robert Saleh. So it's unclear if the Raiders are reciprocating that interest, but I do think it was interesting that Deion Sanders, because we could go over the quotes. Deion Sanders to the NFL has kind of been a popular topic of discussion. And there's a lot of, I guess, people who didn't want to believe it was going to happen, but it's been a popular topic of discussion. And then he goes on Good Morning America and says, quote, this, you know what? Excuse me. And then he says, what you need to know, the only way I would consider is to coach my sons. And then he emphasized that he's talking about Shedeur and Shiloh. And then obviously he went on the podcast with Gilly, the kid, and Wallow, I think is the other guy's name, and said pretty much the same thing. So Colorado, I think, and I said this when the Raiders job opened, Colorado fans should be a bit concerned, not only because this is him possibly showing that he's not going to be in Boulder for that much longer, but this is him showing that, hey, things could be different with the Suns no longer in the picture. That being said, he's also due for a new contract, right? He's currently ranked as a 38th highest paid coach in college football at $5.7 million per year, according to USA Today, which is behind guys like Mike Locksley, Dave Doran from North Carolina State, Sharon Moore from Michigan, Greg Schiano, Shane Beamer. And so I think Coach Prime probably wants to be in that higher range. I don't know if Colorado wants to or can pay him as a top 10 coach in college football with the Lane Kiffins, Kalen DeBoers, Ryan Days, Lincoln Riley, Steve Sarkisians of the world. But they may have to, right? Because he's bringing in so much attention, bringing in so much positivity around the program. You don't want to lose that. And so Coach Prime's people reaching out to the Raiders is interesting. And I think it's people are getting upset about it in the comments right now, saying, "Oh, you're buying into the foosgold. He stopped the nonsense." Listen, Coach Prime, I think, and people forget this, he got into coaching to coach his kids, right? He got into coaching because he wanted to make sure his kids were being coached by the right people. And then he also, whether he said this publicly or not, it allows him to be around his kids as long as possible, right? He talked about it on the Amazon Prime show this new season, which dropped on the 7th. He gets to coach his sons at the college level, which is a very rare opportunity that usually when coaches coach their kid, it's like their kid's a walk-on and their kid doesn't play for their kid doesn't really play. And it's one of those things where he has an opportunity to coach his sons who play at the highest level. He has an opportunity to coach his sons who are really good players, elite one of them, the other one's really good. And he may want to keep doing that. And I think, obviously, when you look at his two sons, Shador's a projected top 5, top 10 pick. But Shiloh, on the other hand, is probably an undrafted free agent, a late round flyer. And so if Shiloh's dream is to get into the NFL, then obviously it's one of those things where if Deion Sanders can help facilitate that, as a father, I wouldn't be surprised that he does. And again, I'll read the report again because I think people think I'm just making this up, but this is Deion Sanders, a report from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is one of the few trusted Raiders insiders. It says Deion Sanders, and quote, this is a quote from someone around Deion Sanders. He has a very strong interest in the job, that being the Raiders' job. The report also said the person indicated that the NFL-connected associates of Sanders reached out to the Raiders to express Sanders' interest in the opening for the job. And obviously, they have a connection with Tom Brady, who is now a minority owner with the Raiders, who is kind of leading their coaching search. But it's one of those things where I feel like if you're Colorado, you know what you need to do, right? Like Coach Prime, even if he's discussing the possibility, I don't think the Raiders' job is going to be his, simply because I think the Raiders simply need to find someone who has NFL experience, who can prove that they could build up a franchise and win now. I think the NFL is a little bit different than the college game, where a head coach doesn't really drive the fan base. Like fans will be excited about the head coach, but you're not going to be the most popular guy. And I don't know if that's something that Coach Prime wants to deal with, where players are trying to establish dominance over him, or if players don't respect him because he doesn't have the resume. That being said, I do think it's interesting for sure. Sorry, I was reading the comments. It says it's obvious Prime used Colorado as a tool to boost his son's draft stock and a stepping stone. Interesting. That's one way to look at it. With the amount of kids that are signing, I don't think he's going to. Right. I think that's also worth noting, right? And I said this earlier in the show for those of you just tuning in. Coach Prime, while he's under contract, just went 9-4. You have to, college football is a very much what have you done for me now? Or what, like, you know the saying, what have you done for me? And Coach Prime just led Colorado to their best record since 2016, their first bowl game since 2020. He produced a Heisman winner, the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. So he's due for a contract extension. He's due for a pay raise. And I think this could be part of that. I think this, whether people want to admit it or not, even though Coach Prime probably doesn't ever need any financial assistance because he's got all the money in the world, right? I think he wants to be compensated like he's one of the best coaches in college football. And I can't blame him, right? You're bringing in all this money for the program. You're bringing in all this attention for the program. The program needs more support, right? I think obviously the fan support is there, but they need more NIL money to get in the mix with some of these top recruits. He needs more money for his coaching pool if he wants to go out and hire some of these top coaches, right? He still has to hire a new offensive line coach, possibly a new defensive line coach. And it's one of those things where Coach Prime, he knows what he's doing. I think he's a very much a, let's see. I think he's very much aware of what messages get out, right? I don't think he goes on Good Morning America, says that without really knowing what could happen, because all of a sudden people are going to start talking about him leaving. And that's kind of been the one thing he said he won't do, is leave Colorado, and obviously we'll find out if that's true in the future. I don't think the Raiders' job is for him right now. I just don't. First of all, the Raiders, as someone who's grown up in California, I know a lot of people who are Raiders fans. I know a few people that work within the Raiders organization. The Raiders is a franchise that they badly need to be successful. Like they are, I think, I forgot what the time span was, but I think it was it the last 10 years? But the Raiders are the least winning NFL team in the league, like worse than the Browns, worse than the Lions, even though the Lions are good now. Like the Raiders have been catastrophically bad. And so is this the moment where they take a flyer on someone who's never coached in the NFL, when we've seen guys like Urban Meyer, Matt Rule, I guess you could go Nick Saban. We've seen guys like this just not work out. And it's like, would they take that chance right now? Like you bring in Tom Brady to full on turn things around for your franchise, and you're going to take a flyer on a college coach who doesn't have a lot of, you should be called, I don't even know what that means, Bradley, but I appreciate it. But are they going to take a flyer on a coach who doesn't really have that experience at the NFL level? Now, he's a good CEO. I feel like he could put a good staff around him. But that being said, it's one of those things where I think we just have to wait and see. Again, I'll read the report because I feel like you guys are getting worked up, and it's not me making this up. Like, you think I want Colorado to lose their most successful coach in decades? You think I want that for the program? You think I want Coach Prime's, like, the success that he brought to the program, the school, and everything else? Do you think I want that to happen? I think if you're getting upset at me for relaying a message, I think it could possibly be true, and that's okay. But this isn't me making it up, right? Again, here's the report. Colorado football head coach Deion Sanders has his eyes on the Raiders coaching job, according to a person with knowledge of the situation. He has very strong interest in the job, the person said. That person also indicated the NFL-connected associates of Sanders reached out to the Raiders to express Sanders' interest in the opening. So clearly there's some sort of interest there. Whether it comes to anything or not, we don't know. I would assume probably not right now, because the Raiders, again, they need to win now. And I think bringing in a first-year NFL head coach when you're trying to draft a franchise quarterback and trying to turn things around after you just fired a coach after 1 year, I don't know if that's the right idea. And honestly, the Raiders, I don't think people realize this either. They're paying $40 million in coaches, or they're going to, right? They're paying Antonio Pierce, Josh McDaniel, John Gruden, and they'd also have to pay their new head coach. So clearly they would probably want to make this one work. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. When we come back, I'm going to be talking about his contract concerns, what Joel Klatt had to say recently, and more. But first, a quick break. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at TurboTax. Let me tell you about TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be more complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who could get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes the undivided attention while you're getting real-time updates on their progress, so you can focus on what really matters. You don't have to lift a finger, but you get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Okay, let's talk about it. And I think this, again, let me preface this because I know there's people that are upset about me saying this, but this are people who with knowledge of the program also. Like, not everything is sunshine and rainbows in life. There's a business to this. And I think people are struggling to understand that aspect. And then like this, like, what am I supposed to say? You've been very consistent regurgitating whatever the national sports media has pushed. It's what's being reported. I don't know what to tell you. Like, people, you could be upset about what's happening, but obviously Coach Prime himself, he went on Good Morning America and said, I would coach in the NFL He opened this can of worms himself. So if he gets upset about all the noise surrounding him in the NFL, then obviously it's like, okay, well, don't say that on Good Morning America. Also, earlier this week, Fox Sports' Joel Klatt, obviously former Colorado quarterback, was on Stokely and Evans with Mark Schlereth, the radio show in Denver, and had this to say: I'm very hopeful that he stays at Colorado. He has a very, very, very good offer in front of him from Colorado. I don't know why he hasn't signed it, but I will tell you, I don't think he works in the NFL. As good as he has been at Colorado, it's a really perfect marriage there where they have given him the keys fully. He can't completely be himself, or he can completely be himself. He cannot do that in the NFL. That being said, like, going back to that first part, very, very good contract offer. Doesn't know why it's signed. That's where it gets interesting. Right. Good point. Someone in the comment section. If he could coach his two sons, he would go to the NFL. I'm still saying you don't mention that you would coach in the NFL if you don't mean for this narrative to sort of get rolling. That was my point. So one of those things. This is where I think Colorado has to step it up somehow. Do they have the money to pay Coach Prime as one of the highest paid coaches in college football? They probably should, right? They've had quite a bit of income come in. For reference, Colorado's coach, Deion Sanders currently ranks 38th in the country according to USA Today in coaching salary at $5.7 million. Coaches that rank above him that probably shouldn't: Mike Locksley from Maryland. Obviously, Sharon Moore at Michigan kind of helped Michigan win a title, $6 million. I would feel comfortable paying Coach Prime more than that. Sam Pittman from Arkansas, pretty much $5 million. He's on the hot seat. Matt Rule at Nebraska, $6.5 million. Kyle Whittingham at Utah is a program legend over there, $6.52. Brett Bielema, $6.6. Marcus Freeman probably going to get a huge raise, $6.6 at Notre Dame. Pat Narduzzi at Pitt, $6.69. PJ Fleck in Minnesota, 6.7. I feel like he's like borderline on the hot seat. Hugh Freeze, 6.7. Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, program legend kind of, $7 million. Jonathan Smith at Michigan State, came over from Oregon State, 7.2. Billy Napier, hot seat, 7.3. Lance Leipold, 7.5. Jed Fish, 7.7. So I think Colorado needs to figure out a way to get Coach Prime in that 7 to 7.1, maybe 2 million range, right? I think you have to give him the money that he probably wants and deserves, because like, you can't just have a figure like Deion Sanders who's boosted your local economy, who's really helped your program, your school in more ways than one, just because you can't just have a guy who's as impactful as Deion Sanders is and not pay him what he deserves. So, and this is a report from the University of Colorado. Coach Sanders helped Boulder's economics significantly. In fact, from six home games during 2023, an estimated $113 million in economic impact was generated in Boulder. Okay, that's another thing. They've helped see the interest in the school grow, right? They're getting more people applying for the school. They're getting more people of color applying for the school. They're getting more interest. Social media following through the roof. I think Colorado is one of the most followed social media most followed social media programs in the country. So it's one of those things where you have to pay him for his value that he's brought. You have to pay him for the 9-win season for what he could do, and you have to pay him to keep him, right? And I think that's the hard part. Like, in most cases, I think you would give your coach a slight raise after a season like 9-4 in year 2, where they went 4-8 the year before, but they went 1-11 before he got here. I think you'd give your coach a slight raise, right? That's if your coach is like an average person, right? If your coach is, we'll pretend I'm the coach, right? If it's Kevin Borba and I worked my way up the coaching ranks and I'm a offensive coordinator mind, it's one of those things where I'm maybe going to generate interest in the next coaching cycle. You give me a pay raise, right? You give me another $1 million. You maybe give me access to a private jet or whatever. You give me a couple, like you give me $500,000 more in my coaching pool. But I'm not Deion Sanders, right? Deion Sanders is boosting the economic impact of the area around Colorado. He's boosting the economic impact of Colorado. And then he's also boosting the program in a way that it may never see again, right? If he leaves, Colorado's transfer portal interest is going to plummet. If he leaves, the interest in these blue chip recruits like Julian Lewis, it's not going to be there unless the program is built up by another coach. So it's one of those things where you have to pay him for not just what he did in 2024, but you're paying to keep him, and you're paying to not just keep him, but keep him happy, right? To keep him from sending out feelers to other NFL jobs, to keep him from going on one of the most popular morning talk shows in America or possibly the world. I don't know where Good Morning America ranks in talk shows, but I imagine it's popular, right? It's been on for my entire life. I know my parents watch it. You have to keep him from going on shows like that and basically opening the door for a departure, right? You cannot have the face of your program being like, you know what? I would leave to go coach in the NFL, to coach my sons, right? You have to figure out a way to be like, hey, Coach Prime, you got everything you want and need here in Boulder, right? Remember when you said you wanted your name on those mountains back there? Remember when you wanted a statue? Or remember when you wanted to build something special? Like, we want you to do that here, and we will give you the resources. I think at the end of the day, if Coach Prime truly isn't interested in the NFL, which, I mean, he said up until this past week he wasn't, this is probably forcing Colorado's hand to invest in him a little bit more, right? And I think that's the hard part about business, because now everyone, Colorado fans, Deion Sanders fans who are attacking me right now, like, everyone wants him in Boulder. And I'm sure part of him wants to be in Boulder. I'm sure part of him is probably open to coaching his kids again, because from a perspective of a father, even though I'm not a father, Deion Sanders, once his kids go to the NFL, there's no telling how much he'll see them as a father. If he's coaching and they're in the NFL, they're going to be traveling. They're going to be having their professional careers. They're going to be sort of figuring out their lives, right? He's not going to have them wandering into his office every day. He's not going to have them just chilling with him every single day and sort of talking about just life, right? That's not going to happen. And I think he knows that. And so it doesn't shock me that the father in him is like, hey, maybe I don't want that to end. But it also wouldn't shock me if he's like, hey, I need more money and I need more resources. Please invest in me, excuse me. Like, you can't just expect Deion Sanders to make gold out of mud every single year, right? Like, he no longer has Shedeur Sanders. He no longer has Travis Hunter. He obviously has Caden Salter, Julian Lewis coming in at quarterback. He's brought in a few corners. Preston Hodge is returning, which I think I need to talk about too. I'll probably talk about that on Monday. He's got him returning. You bring in a former 4-star DB in Makari Vickers from Oklahoma, who's a blue chipper. I think he was a top 65 recruit. That's going to help replace Travis Hunter. It's not going to replace him in terms of like all that he did, but he's bringing in guys. But Coach Brown needs to compete with the Texases, the Ohio States, the Notre Dames, the Alabamas, the Georgias. He wants to be at that level. And if he's unable to get players at that level, then quite frankly, he may outgrow this role, right? You can't expect him to continue to make gold out of mud and just be like, okay, we paid you a little more. Like, they need to fully invest in him and the program. And I think they'll get the return on investment, right? I think that's the whole point of why you take a chance on someone like Deion Sanders in the first place. I don't think you bring Deion Sanders from Jackson State if you don't plan on investing in him long term. So I'm interested to see if this motivates Colorado a little more. That being said, this is, I think, one of two things. We'll go three possibilities. Deion Sanders wants to stay at Colorado, and this is a recruiting tactic, a negotiating tactic. Deion Sanders genuinely wants to coach in the NFL, and maybe is sort of getting a little bit, maybe he's hopeful that the Raiders will take a shot at him. Or maybe Deion Sanders doesn't have interest in coaching anymore, and eventually we're just going to see him step away from coaching, right? I think people forget he got into coaching because his kids are no longer under his guidance. Does he want to continue to coach? We'll have to wait and see. That being said, I think we have to sort of take all things into account. Colorado needs to do whatever it can to keep him, whatever they can to keep him. Coach Prime sort of probably needs to make a statement in the near future, be like, hey, I'm bought into Colorado. And I think everyone else just needs to wait and see, because that's just sort of the world it is. Excuse me. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I'll keep you guys updated, of course. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Cam Newton's message to Coach Prime and his sons. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked on Buffs is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Visit the website and check out the lines, right? You could bet on players scoring a touchdown. You could bet on your favorite to win the Super Bowl. Whatever it is, they got it for you. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked on Buffs. I appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day, making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, so that way you don't miss out on a second of the coverage, because regardless of how upset people will get, I will be talking about what's going on with Colorado. And I think that's just something that people have to understand. I'm here to talk about Colorado. I'm here to cover them the best I can. And I think people are getting upset. And it's not me saying that Deion Sanders wants to go to the NFL. I'm not the one that went on Good Morning America and floated out the possibility. So relax, right? Pump the brakes on that. Let's talk about what Cam Newton had to say. And I find this really interesting, just based on the timing. Cam Newton is an interesting personality, and let me preface this. Cam Newton is a divisive figure in sports right now, because I feel like he is willing to say what no one else will say. That being said, I don't feel like people always love what he has to say. I think Shador and Travis each sort of were like, don't talk to us, like you're kind of weird for what you were saying about us. That being said, let's talk about this. He was talking about Deion Sanders and coaching Shador and at the NFL level, and he said this: as a realist, somebody has to put their foot down and speak facts. I believe in nepotism. I believe everything that you're doing, you got to put your people on. He's done that. But when you think about the statistic right here, Coach Prime has coached Shador in college, or Coach Prime has coached his son Shador in rec ball. Excuse me, a lot of shit sounds. He coached him in high school. He coached him in college. My biggest question for Shador Sanders is, can he be coached by other people outside of his father? Because when you look in the real world, when you think about this statistic, you've only had one coach since you were 8 years old, and now you're 22. Have you built this protection around him? Has he really been coached the right way to be able to say, hey, boy, sit down and shut up? This is Cam Newton's words, not mine. Quotes, Cam Newton. Oh, that's Shador. Hold on. Can you please sit down? He said, because the offensive coordinator or the quarterback coach is employed by his dad. That's the realist. And what do you say to the NFL locker room, to the veterans that have earned their right? Any questions I have from what we've seen from Anthony Richardson this year, from what we've seen from Bryce Young this year? Can Deion bench his son? Can Deion cut his son, Shiloh, or even Shador, given that situation? It's the big leagues in the NFL, and I know the NFL locker room is going to look like, because you're talking men to men, not boys. You're talking to men that probably make more money than you. That's just something to think about. I think this is one of those things that Coach Prime really has to think, like, if he wants to coach in the NFL, to talk about Cam Newton's point here, I really think he has to think about how the locker room will perceive it, right? I think there's always this idea that player coaches are going to work out really well in the NFL because the players like them. But then as soon as they sort of start losing games and they start losing, I guess, the locker room, that player-coach relationship takes a dive. And I can't imagine how having your son as a star quarterback or starting quarterback, I can't imagine that would make the situation any easier. And so I thought that the timing of Cam Newton's points were really interesting, because obviously Coach Prime goes on Good Morning America, says he wants to coach in the NFL to coach his kids. And then obviously now there's reports that he's reaching out for the Raiders jobs. Like, it's one of those things where I think Coach Prime really has to figure out what he wants to do with his life. And is that risk him and his son's coaching or careers in the NFL, right? Because imagine Coach Prime goes to the Raiders and drafts Shador, brings in Shiloh, And I don't know if I think if Shiloh's going to stick in the NFL, I'm not saying he can't make it as a safety in the NFL. I'm sure eventually he could. He'd probably have to be a special teams guy, right? He'd probably have to be a guy on special teams who's making plays, a guy on special teams who's running down the field on kickoff and punt and making big hits, and then maybe works his way into the rotation year 2 or 3, and then maybe contends for some more snaps the year 4. Like, is he going to be okay with not playing his son? Is he going to be okay if, say, Shedeur struggles in training camp and you have to play Aiden O'Connell over him? Is he going to be okay with that? Is he going to be okay with it's him or me, like situations where the GM or the owner is like, hey, we need a new quarterback? Is he going to want to leave the team because they want to replace his son? Obviously, I think Shedeur Sanders will be a really good quarterback in the NFL, but you never know what can happen, right? We've seen Bryce Young was viewed as, outside of being short, was kind of like a surefire, like, hey, Bryce Young's really good. He was a certified top pick. They benched him week 3, I think, of this year, right? That they went back to him eventually because Andy Dalton got in a car accident, but Bryce Young was like thrown out to the wolves. They basically were ready to send him to Alcatraz. CJ Stroud this year, I think people are having doubts about him. Brock Purdy, it led the 49ers to a Super Bowl appearance and an NFC Championship appearance the year before, and there's people that are ready to move on from him. So it's one of those things where, is Deion Sanders ready to make those tough decisions? Again, and right now, someone just said Deion Sanders has no idea what NFL locker rooms are like, right? LOL. Deion Sanders was a player. Deion Sanders was not a coach in an NFL locker room. Deion Sanders was not a coach in the NFL locker room of his sons. It's different. You can't just say Deion Sanders knows what it's like. Deion Sanders last played in the NFL, I think it was in 2004. That was 20 years ago. You think the NFL is the same? You think the NFL of this era, is the same as when he played? The players are the same mentality. Oh boy. So like, this is going to be a difficult decision for all around. And I think it's a big risk. And if he pulls it off, more power to him. If he pulls it off, great. If he doesn't, then I think he risked his career, his son's careers, and I don't know if that was absolutely the right move for Deion per se. So before we go, I'll address some of the comments just because I feel like we're having a lot of fun in this comment section. This one for sure. You say it's different, like you have more experience in Deion. I have no experience in coaching in the NFL level, the college level, any level of that matter. That's not my job to coach. That being said, Deion Sanders has no coaching experience at the NFL level. That's not an incorrect statement. He has never coached at the NFL. He has never had to balance guys making more than him. He has said in the past he would not want to coach in the NFL because he wants to inspire young men. The guys in the pros don't want to be inspired. They want to win games, make money for their family, and do their own thing. This isn't like college football. Let's see another one. This one's interesting. Prime could shut down the rumors if he wanted to. It's as simple as that. It's true, right? A simple tweet saying, you know what? I did say I want to coach in the NFL to coach my kids. But I just don't want to, like, I don't know what the answer would be, but I'd figure it out, right? I'd figure out a statement. It's been awfully quiet from the Sanders camp over there. And I think a lot of the best way to shut this down is to sort of come out and say something yourself. So let's see. Where's the AD? Yeah, Rick George. I don't know. The ball's in Rick George's court, though. I can tell you that. Rick George needs to come out and he needs to deliver a contract or a definitive answer on like, hey, we are doing whatever we can to keep Coach Prime here. So let's see what else before we go. Yeah, I think that's it. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Buffs, making me your first listen of the day. I know it's a divisive topic. I promise you, this isn't me saying I want Coach Prime to leave Colorado. This isn't me saying I want this to happen. I'm just talking about what's happening out in the real world. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so that way you guys don't miss out on a second of the coverage. We're going to continue to cover this saga as it develops. I think probably the most likely avenue for this is Coach Prime is working his way into a new contract with Colorado. He's going to give himself some big money. I also think we have to be prepared for the possibility that he could be interested in leaving. That's just how life goes. That being said, I'll keep you guys covered on Locked On Buffs. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hope all of you have a great Saturday, and I will see you guys on Monday. Unless anything crazy happens. This has been Locked On Buffs.